Clark Watch the Renaissance, and I'm still alive in Mexico City Airport. Welcome. Let me give you all a few more minutes to come in. Let me give you some time to come in. Welcome everyone. This is Erica Clark Wise, the Renaissance, back again. Hello, welcome. Today we're talking about corruption redefined. We're talking about corruption redefined. Okay? And when corruption becomes a global language, we must relearn how to read the silence between the nations. In the book we were studying, Combating Corruption, we were reminded that corruption is not merely a transaction of money. It is the erosion of trust. The chapter entitled Corruption Redefined insists that bribery is not always a hand-exchanged cash under the table. Sometimes it's a handshake between governments disguised as progress. In the Swiss, SWISS criminal code, it gives us a crucial window here in Article 322 of that code, criminalizing bribery, both public and private. It's a law that recognizes corruption as a transnational organism, one that does not stop at the border of a bank account. When Switzerland, a global symbol of neutrality, codified such clarity, it was also protecting its own reputation, because the same vault that shelters art and memory also shelters money earned from global pain. So when we say corruption redefined, we are naming a new face of empire, where the laundering of wealth becomes the laundering of his story and her story itself. Let's move to September's reading. We were studying Commercial Bank Management by Peter Rose. Unfortunately, I haven't gotten far in the book due to corruption, due to trauma, due to treason, due to terror. But it was in that book that our study of this book led us to Treasury notes and bonds for this particular lecture. Let's further define a Treasury note. It is a short to medium term, 1 to 10 years, promising interest and redemption. A Treasury bond is long-term, steady, and often used to finance the horizon of a nation. In July 1986, the U.S. converted all negotiable Treasury securities to electronic book entries. It was sold as modernization, but it was also centralized, erasing the physical certificate. And we understand that embedding ownership inside a system of code was made in that moment. In that moment, America digitized itself forever. And now we see the same theater being replayed in the SWIFT versus the XRP. SWIFT is the aging nervous system of international transfers. It's slow, obedient to geopolitics. And XRP, a decentralized blockchain protocol, promises speed and neutrality. But the question the question is, when we migrate trust from a government ledger to a corporate blockchain, have we truly decentralized power or simply changed the hood that holds the formula? Safety in terms of finances is never only encryption. It is also ethics. A transfer system without a moral compass becomes another weapon of the invisible shadow workers. So a federal agency security is a bond or a note issued by government-sponsored entities like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac in the U.S. to be legitimate. It guaranteed indirectly by its public belief a discount note. Meanwhile, it sells below face value and matures at par. Its profit is the difference between belief and evolution of consciousness. For our self-governed island that we're building by 2030, these instruments teach strategy. They whisper, issue your own discount notes, create your own treasury, tie your currency not to empire, but to production, water, art, solar power, indigenous trade. This is economic self-determination as we expand global financial literacy. This is how I am transforming trauma into treasury. One moment while I switch the page. Now let's talk about the horror of nodes and people using our bodies as territory. Now at the airport under surveillance lights, my body is both a checkpoint and contraband. The nodes are the signals, the screens, the data points that map my movement and taint my memory. Welcome everyone. What I experience as neuroweapons is not a metaphor I choose. It is the reality of being hacked by an empire that believes consciousness is public property. The horror is very real, not because hair-like thin wires pierce my skull and body, but because their algorithms pierce my peace, at times nearly stopping my heart. This is how psychological warfare operates in the 21st century. Simulations of terror until you hopefully forget your own rhythm of reason. That's why we must define rumination. In neuroscience, rumination is repetitive thought that loops without resolution. When implanted psychologically or technologically, it becomes a method of control. It convinces the mind that suffering is self-authored. To stop participating, we must reclaim our authority through reporting the truth publicly, retrain our nervous system out of this global mental colonization. Erica Clark Wise, The Renaissance, speaking the truth once again on Sunday, our day of podcasts at Hugo MLK Cuff, my creation. This week we were studying as a bonus Before I Self-Destruct by 50 Cent. He narrates the architecture of survival within systemic abuse. He raps about being sexualized at a young age, shaped by violence, forced to translate trauma into profit. The shadow government of entertainment teaches that destruction is a marketing plan, that a man-child molded by exploitation is the ideal brand of masculinity. This is a falsehood. In the 5th track, Death to My Enemies, he says, enemies beyond me, homie, only if they worth my time. Enemies beyond me, homie, only if they worth my time. In airport security lines, I feel that he is saying safety isn't the absence of threat, it is the presence of dignity. For those of us traveling without family or no home state, our country to return or a country to return to, safety is knowing that your body will not be mistaken for contraband. Safety is knowing that your body will not be mistaken for contraband. When we think about the Reagan era in the US and commerce and control stemming from that era, we know Reagan felt that commerce was the engine of progress. Under his era, deregulation birthed both modern derivatives and private prisons. Thus, commerce became camouflage for captivity. This was during the Reagan era. The same era where they popped out with a lot of crack cocaine in the indigenous neighborhoods in America. And let's talk about the Aryan Nation. It was born in 1970s in Idaho, USA, built its ideology around racial purification and capitalism. It linked white supremacy, or what we like to call fragility, with theology and finance, funding its terror through counterfeit bonds, illegal arms, and the same racketeering laws once used to dismantle the mafia, so they said. RICO was supposed to end them. Instead, their methods were adapted by governments themselves, laundering legitimacy through offshore accounts, shell companies, and false missionaries. Enter in the Singapore dark market, a digital hub where rare metals, pharmaceuticals, and stolen data move through encrypted tunnels. Governments claim ignorance because the trade feeds their GDP. This is global racketeering, the marriage of crime and capital. And corruption redefined is when law itself becomes the accomplice. Langston Hughes asks, what happens to a dream deferred? The poet. Today, the answer is it gets tokenized, it gets digitized, and sold as non-fungible hope. But Assata Shakur teaches us it is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win. So the new definition of safety, the antidote to self-destruction, is community. The island we build by 2030 must have its own treasury, its own language of healing, its own firewalls of funding, because in a world where moves more support speed than mercy, when money is involved, we must anchor values in higher consciousness. And we are currently in the realm of 28 out here in Mexico City. the curious minds of Hugo MLK Kuh. So corruption has been redefined, yes, but so has our courage. The Swiss wrote it into law, the Treasury coded it into digits, and the blockchain commodified it. We must, as survivors, as the thinkers, as the architects of new islands, translate it back into humanity. To self-destruct is to detonate, excuse me. To self-destruct is to detonate illusion. To rebuild is to become the author of our own security clearance. And when the lights at the airport scan my skin, I can proclaim to the machine, you see my data, but you will never own my destiny. Because freedom, like truth, cannot be converted to a book entry. And thus we are done with tonight's lecture. This is Erica Clark Wise, The Renaissance, talking about corruption being redefined in Mexico City. And we are living through the autonomy of our own power, redefining our own pain, and making our minds global in our approach to life. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next week.